Here's a few troubleshooting tips. So this York had locked out first and second stage of cooling, so I had a code 3 and 4 here, and also 3 and 4 on the binaries there. Now you got to remember that with controllers, trash inputs equals trash outputs. So one thing that you can do, I wasn't able to duplicate the fault, and I'm not even sure this is the problem, but it needs to be fixed. You can start to look at inputs, and then you can start to see that. You can start to just move some stuff and see what happens. So we got to get in here and figure out what's going on. Anytime you see the green crusties, that's a bad sign. So look at that contact there. I'm going to take this apart and inspect it and get it cleaned up. Also, more of the green crusties. So I need to cut these wires and get fresh wire in there. Probably put some dielectric grease in there to help prevent that in the future. These are nasty. All right, let's clean up the circuit board. Here's the circuit board. She is looking a little crusty, but still salvageable. There's a ribbon connector here for the keyboard. And you can see another thing that you want to look for when you have like an intermittent sensor issue or some kind of intermittent input issue is whether or not these solder joints are cracked. These all look pretty good, but I'll get this cleaned up, and my favorite thing for that is isopropyl alcohol and toothbrush. This works great for cleaning your teeth in the field too. Oh, this is pretty nasty, and I'll probably spray that down with some degreaser. The degreaser is just like the best version of brake clean that I can get from the supply house. It's all clean now, cleaned up pretty nicely. I did burnish these contacts here with some Scotch-Brite, and then I'll give them a coat of dielectric grease, which is really just silicone grease. Now here's the connector, or here's the connector where that temp sensor went in. And what I noticed is that these connectors just provide you with another option. So they're actually in parallel. So it doesn't even matter whether these solder joints are good. What does matter is if corrosion gets in this test pin and eats up the trace. See that? So this is where my issue was, and I think that right there is the culprit. Now I have a couple options for repair here, but so I don't interfere with the connector, I'm probably gonna scrape this green coating back and just solder a jumper from here to here. So let me do that. Okay, I've scraped off the coating there, just with a knife works well. Gauge doesn't really matter because this is not a current carrying circuit. However, this will be more than sufficient. What I've done here is just bend down 3 strands and have them all flat. And then I've tinned it with solder. And this is the good lead bearing solder, so this will actually help protect it from corrosion as well. So I'll cut this to size and then solder it here and here. Here's the finished repair. I did sort of glob the solder on to increase the strength, but that should work very nicely. Let's get it all put back together, installed, see what happens. I've coated everything with silicone grease, put a nice amount around here, and no, it won't affect the board. There's no conductivity and dielectric grease, silicone grease, it's the same thing. All right, I'll just go ahead and mention that. So I've coated this with silicone grease. Now with dielectric grease, and you know, it is helpful, but I've also had a few cases where it affects the connection, and mainly that occurs in weak connectors. So this ribbon cable showed no sign of corrosion. I'm not going to put silicone grease on it because this is a fairly weak connector, and there's a chance that these pins may not be able to move that silicone aside to make a 100% connection. Just a little FYI there with the grease. I've cut back the wire, and the inside strands look good, but there's still a layer of corrosion on the outside. I could keep cutting it back, but I just don't want to end up with too short a wire. So what you can do here is just take a tool that's got a rough surface. You can use sandcloth, but you don't really need it. You're just basically burnishing the surface. I'll do that to all of these. On this side, these were good. They're still nice and shiny, so it's gotta just be, you know, moisture and stuff that gets sucked in here. All right, I'll try and show how I'm prepping these wires as well. So just want a little bit of silicone grease there. Once I get them shiny, I'm not going to twist them first. I'm going to go ahead and just coat them and then twist it after that, and that kind of works that silicone down into the wire. And then just going to make sure that these terminals are nice and tight, and that'll clamp everything down, and we'll have a really nice electrical connection. Here's a good example of what the green crusties do. I loosened this wire up here, and a bunch of strands just fell out. Woo! That one needs to be redone for sure. I've finished repairing the wires. The sensor wires were actually the best in this connector, so it's for sure the circuit board that was the issue. Another thing that I'll do is I'll take a little pocket screwdriver and go ahead and just bend these pins down a bit, and that increases their tension. There's a lot of intermittent issues that are caused by pin fitment, so you really have to keep that in mind. Any of them that were a little nasty, I scraped the contact surface with the screwdriver. For you new guys, one thing you want to do is, these connectors are interchangeable, so I've marked them with the Sharpie. There's one, there's two. Now this works well unless you're doing a repair that involves a solvent, and then don't use a Sharpie because the marks disappear. Don't ask me how I know. Creates a big headache. Scratch, take a knife or an awl and scratch marks. And then as far as the connectors go, or anything else, whether it's a big part, a board or whatever, just go wire for wire. Just go one at a time. That's the main way to keep yourself straight on stuff. You can see that one's marked 3 and that one's marked 4. So those will just correspond to my marks there on the housing. Let's get her put in. All right, here was our problem input here, and she is fixed. Nice. All right, well, that's that. Hopefully that was educational and helpful. Keep fighting the machines.